Hi, this is Rachel from RedAnt Fashions. So today we're going to have story time. I am going to share my experiences with you. And today we're going to talk about the Medusa show. We're going to talk about my time that I spent up in Seattle in 2000. It was the end of 2003 and the first half of 2004. Bluehouse was an art collective that I met in California, actually. Some of the people that are in Bluehouse that I was close to are actually from Southern California, and they used to do the Renaissance fairs where I grew up. I ended up becoming close with a group of these people, and then I remember I spent a lot of time flying back and forth from Seattle to where I lived in Ventura County. And so I spent a lot of time up in Seattle, but I was just very close to certain people in the Bluehouse collective. For me, I always looked at Bluehouse Art Collective as a collective of misfits. None of them really matched. Everyone was very mismatched and had their own talents and their own way about doing things, and they came from different genres or different ways of life, but they were all meshed together. It was kind of like where if you took all of the misfits that didn't fit in anywhere and then put them all together and created a tribe. For me, that was Bluehouse Collective. Hannah was actually one of the dolls that was in the audience in the crowd, but she actually stuck with me for the 14 days where I did nothing but crochet non-stop and slept somewhere in between, and that's literally how I created all of the outfits for the Medusa show. Hannah was always with Aiden, and Aiden was her pet rat. So Aiden was a part of everything. He was always dressed up in RedAnt with her. He was always going to the events and to the shows. She was always taking him to the club. So Aiden was just kind of a part of everything that we did.
Just knock it off. You're killing me.
Of course. Take this photo.
No, I'm not shooting at you. Don't touch.
The Medusa show, we had everybody show up really early in the morning, and it was an all-day event. Anyone that's ever done fashion shows or any type of productions, there's a lot of hurry up and wait.
The eye of the storm.
We always started really early in the morning, and then it was an all-day event, and we usually ordered out pizza and everyone hung out together. There was always photographers, there was videographers always on the scene documenting everything while it was going on. I was usually in the background somewhere working on one of the outfits because I never had anything finished. I was notorious for that. I was always crocheting all the way up until the point of the show. I met Corey back in 2003 at the Halloween fashion show. Like, I actually really fully met him. He was dressed up as Thing 1, and I just remember him running up to me and being like, "Rachel, oh my god, blah, blah, blah." And we ended up spending the whole entire night together running around and just having a blast. We were like inseparable, joined at the hip. It was so much fun. And that was really where my relationship really formed, and this bond sort of happened between Corey and I.
That'd be fine. Yeah. And I put it on. I try to put it on fairly light. Come off pretty easily, especially if you have a makeup remover. Even if you don't, just like a bunch of warm water and soap.
He was an amazing artist, and he drew phenomenal pictures. He was very, very, very talented. I always felt like the human face and the human body is like a blank canvas with curves. And so a lot of what I think Corey did was he kind of took that concept and then started creating onto that canvas. And so all of these characters would emerge. His work was beautiful. It was phenomenal. It was very, very detailed. You could tell that he was a very stylized artist. And you could also tell that he wasn't a makeup artist. So he did everything the way the painter would do it. It was just, it was beautiful to watch.
Like something?
What's the driving force?
As time went on, he started doing a lot of the makeup for RedAnt. Because him and I spent so much time together as friends, he didn't mind taking the time and sitting with me and talking about, like, what is your vision for this fashion show? What are you trying to get across? What's the story?
The 409 or anything like that.
Although, you know, it might help. Might take off all the skin with it, but, you know, you don't really need that.
He would come up with makeup concepts based on what it was that I wanted to get across and what my characters were. I think that was the first time with RedAnt where I really started looking at the fashion shows more as performance pieces, in the sense that I really did come up with characters that had concepts behind them. And a lot of that stemmed with my work with Corey.
Hey Ken, before you go anywhere, sorry, I forgot to have you sign.
The fashion shows started having its own dialogue. There started to be a backstory. We were starting to almost script the fashion shows in a lot of way, and I think Medusa was the starting of that.
Okay. 8 o'clock. That's where I'll be. 8 o'clock.
From the moment we conceived the idea of the Medusa show to the actual day of the Medusa show, we had 14 days to put this show together, as well as come up with all of the costumes and the characters and the script and everything. It was really fly by the seat of your pants kind of concept. Valentine's was coming up quickly. I knew that I wanted to do the show at more of a club setting, downtown Seattle. I didn't want to do it in the underground bars anymore. I wanted something that had more.
And what's this? And I have stuff in the front as well. She has stuff over here. Do I need so much though? I can take more of this right here. And then the face with yeah. And then more of this in the back of the ponytail. But yeah, there's just lots of this over. And some of it goes over and some of it goes under. Okay. Thing. I get it. Cool.
So, what's your role in this whole scheme of things?
Me? Slave labor.
As opposed to quartermaster?
Right? Hannah Rames was another person I met out on the playa, and then I re-met during the Halloween fashion show in Seattle, and she was another person that was very talented with hair, very talented with makeup. She was extremely creative, and she was this beautiful woman. And she used to come around and she used to help out with the fashion shows and the events. She was a lead singer of a band, so she used to come over and we used to dress her up before she went out to do her performances. But she was just amazing and talented, and she was always around. She always made herself available, and she always showed up and helped out wherever she needed help with. And she did a lot of the hair and then assisted Corey with the makeup for a lot of different events that took place in Seattle. She was just a phenomenal. I love her to death.
Symbolic. What? What? I don't care. No sneaking.
Yeah. Because
Throughout the day, people kind of just hung out, got their makeup done, took pictures. Paul was in the basement taking pictures. Tony was running around with a video camera. So was Sid. And I believe, I want to say there was somebody else there with a video camera. There was always a crew of boys that had video cameras, and I don't know if they worked together or separately, because again, I didn't know everyone from Seattle on a personal level. They were all people that I met through Bluehouse Collective or were associated with Bluehouse Collective, and so it was like you were family by association. And so you're still trying to get to know everybody, but you're already immersed in their worlds all at the same time. But it was fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Freeze. Nice. Very nice. Keep freezing. I mean, keep frozen.
For me, the triple goddesses represented the different phases of womanhood and the different archetypes of women.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have officially stopped.
Ooh, good one. Wait, hold on. Hold still.
Oh my god, I gotta pee. Can we get the fountain?
Fucking light up there. Those powers aren't on though.
Yeah. Well, this one's supposed to be stuck up in it and shining on.
Kim and Wendy and Delaney, the reason we chose the women that we chose to be the triple goddesses because they exuded this sexuality of being a woman, but they also had this maternal instinct about them. I don't know how to explain it. Just the energy about them was very playful, but very, very strong, very feminine and very maternal. And then there was this duality about them where there was this sexuality, but this womanly sexuality about them that they just exuded. It was beautiful. And so I couldn't have picked better women to actually be the triple goddesses and play that part.
Oh, I think that's your turn. I met you last time.
I'm tired of being hot. Can we act stupid now?
That's 80 pictures of you guys. 80.
80.
What do you think? You're satisfied? You had enough of us?
Hell no.
Fine, go for it anyway.
No, I got
Oh wait, there went
my
Justin.
sign on there.
Justin was always around. I lived with him. And then him and I were also very intimate together. Justin was perfect. He was emotionally unavailable and he was just as damaged as I was. So it was a perfect person for me to obsess over and give my attention and my time to. The more I got to know Justin, the more his costumes got more elaborate. I never just dressed Justin. He always had the ant symbol on him, but none of that was ever RedAnt. That was always his own creations, and they got darker and weirder as time progressed. And it was almost like every time I peeled back a layer, you ever have somebody look at you and you feel completely exposed? And they see you in all of your dysfunctions and all of your ugliness, and they still don't run away. It almost makes you feel like you want to bind yourself and bondage yourself shut so that you have more of a shield so people can't penetrate it. That was kind of how I always felt about how his outfit seemed to get more elaborate and darker. And it was interesting because the darker his outfits got, if you took a closer look, it almost reflected what was going on in myself as well. I definitely identified with it. I might not have always agreed with it or liked it, but I definitely identified with what I was looking at. It was interesting. It was like constantly looking in the mirror, which, I don't know, I think made me thrash even harder. Sometimes you don't like what you're looking at. Justin was one of those people I definitely think that I was very intrigued with because he was damaged in a lot of ways. I would say that he was damaged just as much as I would, or damaged even more. When you're damaged as a child and you're still trying to work it out, it's really easy to pick out the people in the crowd that are just as messed up as you are. It's almost like looking in the mirror and not knowing what to do with it. I think I was really annoying and obsessed because it gave me a puzzle to try to figure out, like, can I just rip that Band-Aid off? How far down the rabbit hole can I go? Can I just keep peeling back those layers? I'm sure it wasn't exactly that exciting for him. It definitely made him crazy. But what do you expect? You're dating someone crazy. I think what I was so curious about with Justin was he had these scars on his face that were around his eyes, and they were self-inflicted, and I'm sure they looked tribal or interesting. But then he also had this tattoo that was around his belly button, and for me, the windows to your soul of your vessel are your eyes, so why would you slash it and cause the windshield to be cracked in a sense? Like, what is it that you don't want to look at? Like, why do you want to look at it through a blurry lens? That was kind of how I saw the marks on his face. And the belly thing was really interesting to me because the way the tattoo was, there was burn marks all the way around his belly button. So it almost looked like he was trying to sever the cord, which is your umbilical cord, which is your core chakra, which is also your umbilical cord that attaches you to your mother. So it was very interesting for me because those were the things that I picked up on immediately when I met him, and I instantly became intrigued because it was like, not only are you damaged, but there's a lot of layers there to peel back and figure out. And so in a lot of ways, I think I became obsessed with trying to figure that out. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that if I could figure out the weird neuroses in him, it would somehow fix the neuroses in myself. I know that sounds really weird, but I don't know, eccentric minds are really fucked up in the thought process.
I know, I've been stalking you.
And there were certain people that showed up in the green room because we spent so much time, and I think we spent half of our night in the green room behind stages, hanging out, getting ready for the event, because there was all these other performers that were happening. It was Valentine's night, and Medusa, the Club Medusa, was having their own events. There was a lot of performers. So we spent a good majority of our night behind the scenes, having our own party, hanging out, taking pictures, socializing, and it was really fun to see.
Get those pictures of me standing by the Panasonic. put those up on my website when it's created.
It was really fun to see familiar faces that had found their way to the green room that I had no idea how they even got in, but it was a blast to see them and have them hang out and be supportive and laugh and giggle, and it was fun. It was definitely fun. It was like we had our own little private party in the back.
Using that really cool camera with the follow focus and the matte box. Eyebrow.
Jade and Christina was this beautiful lesbian couple that we knew that were just beautiful and exuded sexuality and what it was to be a woman. They were very feminine, very strong. They were just beautiful, beautiful girls. So it made a lot of sense to put them naturally as to be seductive and put into that role. While the fashion show was going on, the performance pieces were going on, there was 2 different stages, and so while those 2 were happening, there were, I think, 3 or 4 girls that we put out into the audience that were always out in the audience mingling with the crowd while the performances were happening. And they had strips of red ribbon that they held onto, and they were passing them out in the crowd. But what Corey had done was he had taken my grommets and glued them around the girls' faces, and then he had taken my red yarn and then he had sewn their lips shut, and he gave them all doll-like eyes. And so they had to use their body language and facial expressions in order to express themselves and communicate and flirt with the audience as they moved around and kind of directed traffic. They also, that was the other thing that they did, was they kind of helped the audience figure out where things were happening, if it was on the bottom stage in the crowd or if it was up top. They kind of helped directed that. The venue itself for Medusa, it's a club setting. And so there was a stage that was up really, really high, and it's just like almost like a balcony. And then there was a stage down below in the crowd that had this huge screen that divided a wall, and you could project images on it. So we projected all the RedAnt scrap footage onto the screen, and you can see it from both sides in the middle of the club. And then we used the platform in front of it as a stage, and we used the balcony as a stage. And so there was 2 different stages going on, and there was a staircase that came from the green room down into the crowd, and that was where we kind of used as a runway. The show started and Pan came out and awoken the triple goddesses and then sent them out into the audience and into the crowd. Pan is an archetype as well as a symbol. There's a lot of symbolisms in RedAnt fashions, in the fashion shows and in the photo shoots. There's a lot of archetypes that definitely take place. I don't think that it was always methodically thought out as much as they were definitely imageries and philosophies as well as archetypes that I've just kind of resonated with and have always kind of made sense to me, you know, and then you dig a little deeper and you try to understand why. But I mean, since the very beginning, these symbols and images have kind of bled through in RedAnt without even knowing it. So Pan sent the triple goddesses out into the crowd, and I had covered them in the bustles that I make out of shredded fabric and yarn, and we covered them all up, and then they went out to the stage out in the audience and danced to some tribal music and then did a striptease. And then when they did a striptease, they tore down the layers of shredded fabric and bustles that they were covered in, and they had these beautiful RedAnt outfits underneath it, but they were very much bondaged into their clothes. Was this beautiful, tall, luscious black man that I remember Samaya, who was the only other female that lived in the house with us in Bluehouse. There was like 6 boys, and then there was Samaya and I. And I remember we had gone to a party and event, and she's this little tiny gypsy girl that's like 5 foot, and I remember she came across Corbett and met him and decided that he was just so delicious that we had to keep him and make him a part of RedAnt and figure out a place for him because he was just so amazing. And so on the second stage, up top, while the girls are down there dancing, you have these doll-like girls out in the audience. This beautiful man comes out, and there's these 2 seductresses that come out after him, and they're up on the balcony, and they're dancing, and they're seducing him, and playing with him, and teasing him, and there's this whole dance that happens. Well, while he's not paying attention and he's like getting into the seduction of it all and playing with these women, what he doesn't realize is that these women are pulling out this red crocheted rope and they're slowly binding him up in it and entangling him in the rope. And one by one they start strapping his arms up and his appendages up where he can no longer move. Well, the man being seduced by the women is getting entangled in the web. Pan comes out and grabs some red ribbon and he covers his eyes. And at that point, the girls that are out in the audience start pulling out red ribbons and passing them out to the people out on the dance floor. And they're not quite sure what's going on. And then Pan points to the man being entangled up on the balcony. And one of the girls jumps on his back and strangles him and kills him, and he didn't even see it coming. That show was interesting because I think in a lot of ways that was my way of crying out that there was a problem. I think in a lot of ways I was speaking in volumes what was going on inside myself, and I don't think a lot of people were listening. I think some of the people involved in the show were kind of confused by what was going on or why, or some of them just didn't question, or they were like, there's some dark shit she's trying to like sort through. But no one really addressed it head on. Sacrifice. That's what the Medusa show was. That's what the Medusa show was all about. It was about being silenced. It was about not being heard and being a martyr in a sense. With the Medusa show, Mozart, Christopher Robinson, he had actually produced the show and art directed it. I remember I took all of this beautiful fake velvet fabric and I had shredded it all up and I had crocheted him a tuxedo, and then I put wire in the tails so they bent and torqued, as well as the collar. So it was this really beautiful tuxedo that he wore, but I remember I was crocheting it all the way up until we left to head to the venue.
Right now, we have DJ Beans from Los Angeles, California. Pimpin' Hoes, Club Medusa. Go ahead, DJ Beans, right here. Club Medusa, DJ Beans. We also have Yvonne Lux to my left. Confident dance cover model. Confident dance cover model.
2 weeks after the show, I had a complete meltdown and trashed my whole entire room and took 2 boxes of sleeping pills and climbed into a bathtub. I was found several hours later in the hallway between the kitchen and the living room and the staircase up to my room. I was half dead and slipping from my body. A month later, it was time to decide whether or not I was going to head back down to Southern California and do Southern Fare with RedAnt Fashions and my mom. I went ahead and decided to go ahead and do Southern Fare, and that was the last year that RedAnt had a booth at the Renaissance Fair. That fair was really interesting for me because I don't think people really knew what was going on or what I had just come out of.
Right now, we have DJ Beans from Los Angeles.
The Medusa show was directed and produced by Sean Maria Rachel, I can't remember her last name, but very, very beautiful, talented girl, and Christopher Robinson, known as Mozart. Without those people, I don't think that show would have happened. They really organized everything, put everything together, and really were the leaders of this particular event and show.
Yvonne Lux to my left, ladies and gentlemen, from San Diego, California. In the Indian booth right now, we have DJ Beans. DJ Beans.
To my surprise, once the show actually finished and we kind of mingled into the crowd, it was to my surprise that there were some people that did show up that were familiar faces from my own community, and that just was so touching and so amazing to see. I was dumbfounded because I had gotten such strong reactions that people weren't going to attend and they weren't going to be supportive about my decision to have the show where I was choosing to have the show. So it was amazing to look into the audience and to be picked up and grabbed and hugged and embraced by these people that I so desperately wanted to be there, but I wasn't sure if they were going to attend. It was the most amazing feeling to look out into the crowd and see familiar faces, people that I didn't expect to actually show up to the show, people I had no idea that even knew about the fact that the show was happening, and they came out to give support and to give love, and they were there, and it was amazing. That was an interesting show for me simply because the community that I was immersed in amongst the burners and the Bluehouse collective, I didn't feel a lot of support as far as coming out and coming to the show and attending the show. When I told people where I was having the event, people kind of frowned upon it, or why are you going to a meat market to do meat market kind of venue to do a fashion show? Why are you doing it there? That's not your audience. As well, there was a lot of, I didn't have a guest list for that particular show unless you were directly involved with the event. There was no guest list. We weren't given that. And so a lot of people in our own community were like, well, if we're not on the guest list, we're not going to come out and support. And the price at the door to attend was $25, and that seemed like a lot for people to spend. So I did kind of feel the pressure with that, and it was kind of disheartening to a certain extent, but at the same time it was kind of like, well, what do you want me to do? I mean, at some point I have to branch out outside of my comfort zone and do something different.
Damn, B, you got those sexy.
So that's the story of the Medusa show. That was in February of 2004. It was Valentine's night of all nights to do it.